It's right, live, say it, go for it.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. We are live. Apologies for the late start. Live TV, anywhere you get it, always has its problems, and we had a few problems today, but we're up, we're running, and again, apologies if we've for the late start. This is the second Google Hangout. The first one we discussed, it's really a continuation. In part one, the idea was to discuss common misconceptions about Shia Islam, try to address them in a summary sort of way, nothing too heavy, nothing too detailed, just to try and for people to understand if we believe certain things, this is the reason why we believe them. This is the second session, so inshallah, because there was a large number of questions and there was an overflow, I predicted it wasn't going to be able to be covered in 2 hours. So that hasn't.
I like the way you pointed that out, Sayyid.
I did. So here we go again, and I assume it's going to happen again. But let's see. Anyway, apologies. Let me just introduce all of the brothers, which are it's the same as last week. So we've got brother Ryan here. We've got brother Abu Zar and Sayyid Ali as well. So without further ado, if I ask the very first question, again, these are based on questions that have been asked of us and which are commonly thrown at us as well, where people suggest certain things. So the first question is, why do we visit the shrines, and why do we perform tawassul? I seek intercession of the dead. So, brothers, who wants to answer that to start with? Sayyid Ali, do you want to touch on it first?
I'm going to run from that question because that's quite a big question, but I can touch on it briefly.
Okay, brother, let's try. I'll ask brother Abu Zar first.
I don't mind. I don't mind just touching on it very.
Okay, touch on it briefly then. Go on.
So when it comes to istighatha and tawassul, there was a difference opinion. There's a difference of opinion about it from a historical perspective. Generally speaking, the majority of Muslims, regardless of what sect you follow, believe that it's permissible. So seeking intercession can be of different kinds. Some people seek intercession through the name and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's one means of seeking tawassul or seeking nearness to God. Another method is through your amal. You can seek intercession through your acts of worship. Trying to think of any other forms of tawassul. Yes, another form of tawassul could be you can ask a pious and sincere person to pray on your behalf. So there's different types of tawassul. Salafi scholars like Albani wrote a book called Tawassul and Its Kinds. He does deal with this topic pretty well. However, when it comes to the narrations that deem it permissible, with his examples of the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, allowing it, he considered these narrations to be fabricated and weak. Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, even though he deemed it permissible, he deemed a certain form of tawassul. He deemed a certain form of tawassul as being permitted. For example, he believed you can, through your supplication, ask by the status of the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him. I think he mentioned it in his famous book of fatwa, Mujam al-Fatwa, and he talks about how the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, gave a man a supplication to recite, and this individual, I believe he suffered from some sort of stomach ulcer, and the man went away home, and then he recited this supplication in absence of the Prophet, because obviously at the time the Prophet wasn't physically with him, and the man was cured as a result of reading that supplication. In terms of visiting graves, historically, even the Sahaba themselves, they differed on this, whether it was something that was permitted or not. There are narrations mentioned in Bukhari where the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, allowed people to, visit the graves as a reminder of the hereafter. I haven't come across any narration that has prohibited it. But having said that, again, majority of Muslims deem it permissible. I know there's some Salafis out there who don't even permit visiting graves, and especially when it comes to women, they have a clear-cut ban on women visiting graves as well. So that was a bit on that point. I don't know if any of the brothers want to mention.
Thank you, Said. Brother Abuzar, do you want to comment?
Yeah, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. This topic is, like Said Ali said, very common these days. It wasn't a big topic until Ibn Taymiyyah popped out of nowhere, and famous Shafi'i scholar Taqiyuddin as-Subki also mentions this in his refutation against Ibn Taymiyyah, which is, in my opinion, pretty strong. Anybody can check this it's on the internet, also in English. Taqiyuddin as-Subki said nobody in Islam ever had a problem with istighatha, not only tawassul but istighatha. So you can also ask a deceased prophet or waliullah to make dua for you, for Allah. So you don't ask the wali or the prophet. That would be shirk, of course. But Taqiyuddin as-Subki said nobody in Islamic history ever had a problem with it until Ibn Taymiyyah came. And it's actually pretty funny too that Ibn Taymiyyah never made takfir on Taqiyuddin as-Subki for that. So this one thing Salafis should keep in mind. So then they have their chain takfir. So if Ibn Taymiyyah doesn't make takfir on this obvious kafir for him allowing that, then everybody not considering Ibn Taymiyyah a kafir would be a kafir too. But that's a matter for them, not for us. There is no problem anywhere to be found in the Quran or in the Sunnah with asking people on your behalf to mention you in front of Allah, because we know the dead people are alive, and we have a narration, I think it's in one of the two Sahih, in Muslim or Bukhari. After a battle, the Muslims were throwing the dead mushrikeen into a well, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, they can hear you better than you can hear me. So even the dead mushrikeen can hear after they're dead. So why cannot prophets and imams and the friends of Allah hear us and then ask on our behalf in front of Allah? There's no problem at all. No problem. And the evidences against it are really weak. It's really constructed, and really have to think around at least three corners to get something against tawassul and istighatha. Salafis are very scared of Muslims becoming Catholics, like worshipping saints or something, but I think that's a very weak argument, and the arguments against tawassul are not very strong. Never came across any strong argument, and maybe that's all I have to say. And we found even Omar in the Sunni narrations asking Ibn Abbas to make tawassul on behalf of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I cannot think of any strong argument against it, not at all, and not even from the Sunni side is anything except that this is all this strange neo-Umayyad Islam that came through Ibn Taymiyyah. Nobody in the Orthodox Sunnism had a problem with it. Yeah, that's my 2 cents on it.
Thank you, Brother Abuzar. Ryan, do you want to add anything to that point?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone listening. From just a human perspective, it warms the soul when one goes and visits the grave of the deceased, and it's a way of communicating with those who we may feel cannot communicate with us. You know what I mean? When someone passes, there might be some things that were left unsaid, or et cetera, and it's a very natural human thing to do. And it's not just us who visit the dead. According to our narrations, Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam, he was once asked about this from one of his companions, and the companion asked, what happens, we visit the graves of the dead, do they visit us? And he said that yes, they do, depending on their status in the next life. An angel will accompany them, and they will watch over their beloved ones. And this in itself is also very comforting to those who are mourning the deceased, and it also shows that it's also comforting to those who are deceased, and they get to visit their loved ones. There's never the connection is never lost. You know what I mean? It's just if you seek to find it. Just as, you know, we can continue having a bond with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even in times of complete misguidance, He will be there for us. he lets us know that our ancestors and those who have left this world are also in some way still connected to us. And I find that a very beautiful thing. So when we have certain scholars of the past or of today that argue that such a thing, isn't Islamic, well, we find that it is very much Islamic, and it's shown throughout human history where it has happened. And this idea where it's just bid'ah and, sometimes even shirk to do such a thing really comes from this reactionary movement that seemed to have spawned during the time of Ibn Taymiyyah. And I think Muslims really need to be aware that not everything that, a Christian, a Jew, or someone else does is necessarily un-Islamic. You know what I mean? We're all human. This deen has been with us since the time of Nabi Adam alayhi salam. So we really need to just really reassess ourselves and our stances on these things, and really look at scripture, see what goes against it and what doesn't, and then also using our intellect to try to understand what is in and what is out. And then I think that's all I can really say on the matter.
Thank you very much, Brother Ryan. I was also thinking about this from a logical perspective.
Sorry, Sayed, before you do, I just want to quickly bring out something on my screen, if that's okay. It's just a narration which I mentioned earlier, and this is taken from, if I just zoom up on my screen, if that's possible. Give me a second. Yeah, so this narration is mentioned in Shia Muslim, and that's the reference there. The chapter is called "The Prophet ﷺ asked his Lord for permission to visit the grave of his mother." So I just wanted to mention here, so the general Sunni position regarding the parents of the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon them, unfortunately, well, actually, to be fair, generally speaking, the Sufis generally believe that the Prophet's parents were believers, but again, when it comes to the Salafis, our Salafi brothers, they consider the Prophet's ancestors to be disbelievers. So the Shia view is that obviously we believe that the Prophet's ancestry was always pure, and they always had believers amongst. He was always from the loins. His soul was settled within the loins of these prophets who were all believers. So this narration, anyway, it says Abu Hurairah reported, Allah's apostle Allah visited the grave of his mother, and he wept, and he moved others around him to tears, and said, I sought permission from my Lord to beg forgiveness for her, but it was not granted to me, and I sought permission to visit her grave, and it was granted to me. So visit the graves, for it makes you mindful of death. Okay, so here, even the Prophet, according to their books, even though his mother was not a believer, it was still permitted for the Prophet to visit the grave of his mother. Oh, I apologize. I don't think it came up on the screen. You guys should have told me. Well, let me bring it up for you. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
see.
That's the narration there. And when you get a chance, you can read that narration. But it says here, right at the last sentence, I sought permission to visit her grave, and it was granted to me. So visit the graves, for it makes you mindful of death. Yeah. And the chapter is called "The Prophet asked his Lord for permission to visit the grave of his mother." So as you can see, if it's allowed to visit the grave of, according to them, a disbeliever, then yes, of course, there's not a problem to visit the grave of a believing person.
It's pretty common amongst some people that they have this slogan of we, and they also say that about some Sufis and other Sunnis, that they worship graves. And I don't really know where this comes from. And they will argue against raising the graves and having some kind of shrine around the grave, because nobody raises the actual grave, but there's a shrine around it. And we can see when we look in Surah Al-Kahf, that's what people did when the Ashabul Kahf died. They made a masjid on their graves, and Allah doesn't criticize that at all. So that's maybe an interesting point, because some people are in doubt about having actual shrines around the graves, and they see this as some kind of grave worship, but it's just adornment. And there's nothing wrong with adoring the place around the grave, not the grave itself.
Don't you find it ironic, though, because they will say, "Oh, look, you know, we call people to worship Allah." Obviously, no sane human person would, you know, it goes against rationality to worship somebody else other than God. You understand? But
Sure.
you know, they say worship Allah. What type of Allah? We had a series of show on the concept of Tawheed as believed by some of our brothers. You know, what worship an individual who looks like a child, you know, a clean-shaven boy, you know,
with curly hair.
with curly hair.
Yeah.
So what? You know,
It's like me in my childhood, that one.
what is,
Stupid sort of narrations they have.
but anyway, so yeah, should we carry on, Sid?
Yeah, sorry, I'm off track there. I think I wanted to just add a point also. The fact that the whole idea when you visit not just graves, because don't forget they expand this concept of shirk to say if you go to any of these places of historical importance. So if we go, for example, to where the Battle of Uhud took place, or Battle of Badr took place, or hey, any they try to. If you look at the Saudis who've got control of those sort of lands, they're hell bent on smashing up graves and this sort of. It does amaze me because if you look at any sort of society, any other culture, they are proud of their history. You know, you'll have the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and you know, in different countries, you'll see people preserving the history to see its importance. Because you know, if you walk into historical sort of monuments, you know, it's like a walk into history itself. So you can try and place yourself in that position. I'm a planning lawyer, and one of the areas that we kind of get involved is preserving buildings which have got some historical merit. Ryan, you know that's the same concept in Australia as well, isn't it? Where a building of cultural merit of heritage is preserved, so it benefits not just this generation, the next generation. So when you enter it, you appreciate the past history. So it does make me amazed when you do have, you know, this even Taymiyyah type of thinking, which is hell bent on destroying history, destroying graves, preventing anyone to visit them. It just doesn't make any sense to me. You know, every other culture is proud of their history. These guys want to destroy it. Although interestingly, I'm not sure if you're aware, they're actually trying to turn the birthplace of Ibn Wahab, that town, into a place of um, for a tourist industry. So they're preserving their own founders' history and destroying that of the seal of all prophets.
Yeah,
Incredible.
you just said that it doesn't make sense to you. It makes sense to me if you're going to look at it from their perspective, in which history needs to be eradicated.
That's true.
You know what I mean? They wanted, like, they're turning the burial place of, as you just said, of Ibn Wahab into a tourist attraction. So they're drawing people to it, making it nice and pretty, but at the same time,
Exactly.
you know, they're trying to just recreate the entire understanding of Islam, in my opinion, and what it seems to be from what I've seen from all their actions and writings, etc.
Well, historically speaking, a lot of these, you know, these churches and even some of these synagogues, um, they were, you know, they were protected under Muslim rule, um, and some of these tombs as well. And it wasn't until we had this recent ISIS outburst where you'd see these individuals who were, you know, demolishing these graves of some of the prophets and even
Yeah.
notable companions of the prophet, which is, you know, it's not shocking because, you know, they follow that sort of extreme Kharji ideology, which kind of leads them up to you know, behaving in such a way. But you know, again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran as well how he preserved the body of Fir'aun as a reminder to the people. So, you know, as you mentioned, sometimes these places are there so we could, you know, so we can reflect and we can, you know, go to these places, be it even, you know, a graveyard, and you know, it's a simple reminder for the people of the hereafter. So yeah, Hassan Bukhari seems to have vanished now. We can't see
No,
him.
I'm here, guys.
Sure. So yeah, I
Give me a
mean,
sec.
yeah, I mean, what can you say? I mean, the topic of Tawassul itself and visitation of graves, I think it's one which requires like a whole complete series on that. You know.
Inshallah, I think we should stress one point that these Google sessions, we're here just to provide a kind of a summary of typical objections. Inshallah ta'ala, we will be probably working on more detailed programming on, for example, even one objection. We could probably talk on that for hours. So our plan is, inshallah, if there are specific well-known objections, we will try to work on those and have specific shows dedicated to it, which leads us into the next one, which will definitely be subject to detailed content in the future, inshallah ta'ala. Do the Shias believe that the Quran has been distorted? A very common objection. I'll tell you something. You know, when I was reading like polemical sort of material in my university days, and we're talking about a long time, long before Ryan was born, I think. During that, I recall a book by Bilal Phillips. He translated a book called Mirage in Iran, and this I remember this is the first time I read material which talked about Tarif of the Quran, that the Shias believe in it. And anyway, I don't know who the author was. It was just a translation of Phillips. And in this book, it did amuse me when at one point he says that he knew some ex-Ravzi in Lebanon that had he'd become a Salafi or whatever sect that I can't remember what he referred specifically described it as, but he was telling his friend, he was telling the author, oh, the Shias, they believe the Quran's been distorted. In fact, I've got that distorted Quran in my house, and I will definitely bring it to you to show you. To this day, I don't think that brother, whoever he was, has ever produced this other Quran, because I'd be fascinated to see it. Because if you ever go into any Shia mosque or any Shia institution, any Shia house, the Quran that we have in our hands is exactly the same. But this ex-Shia apparently had in his possession a version of the Quran which nobody else has seen. But anyway, Sayyid Ali, I know this is a topic close to your heart, so I'll inshallah let you expand on it, and then if the other brothers also wish to contribute, please do so.
Yeah, so to unmute my mic there. So yeah, so when we talk about the tahrif of the Quran, first we need to obviously understand what tahrif means. So you have different types of tahrif of the Quran. What I mean by this is you have tahrif of meaning. So when we look at the Quranic verses, when we read certain ayats, they can be interpreted differently by different people. So Ryan, I think you need to mute your mic because you're getting slight disturbance from your side. So yeah, so when we talk about tahrif of the Holy Quran, you have tahrif in meaning, you have tahrif in addition, meaning believing there were some extra verses that were supposed to be part of the Holy Quran. Then you have tahrif in deletion, so verses which were allegedly part of the Holy Quran and no longer part of it. So generally speaking, the general consensus of the Shia ulama of the past and present is that the Quran is without doubt complete, especially when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran that He's the protector of it. So any Muslim who believes that the Quran is the protected word of God, they wouldn't even cast doubts on other people having that belief. In fact, they wouldn't even accuse others of having another Quran, because it's very clear that if Allah is saying that He's the protector of it, nobody can forge lies and bring words from themselves claiming that it's from the Holy Quran. Nevertheless, there may have been some ulama in the past who may have held this position about believing the Quran may have been affected by tahrif, and not just by tahrif in meaning. However, later it is said that some of these scholars retracted the position, and they no longer believe that. But having said that, I'd like to bring up a narration. This is from Bukhari. You just give me a minute. Actually, this is from Sahih Muslim, and this is taken from Sahih Muslim. You can see, sorry, Sunan Ibn Majah, the chapter on marriage. You can get this from sunnah.com, and the English reference is volume 3, book 9, hadith number 1944. And the narration says as follows. It was narrated that Aisha said, the verse of stoning and of breastfeeding an adult. That's another interesting topic, breastfeeding of adults. Some of our brothers believe that it's permissible to suckle an adult male. So yeah, the verse of stoning and the breastfeeding of adult, breastfeeding adult 10 times was revealed, and the paper was with me under my pillow. And when Allah's messenger died, we were preoccupied with his death, and a tame sheep came and ate it. So if you notice in the footnote, the author writes, these verses were abrogated in recitation, but no ruling. Other hadith established the number of for fosterage to be 5. And the narration is graded Hassan by Darul Islam publication. I think other scholars like Albani, he also authenticated the same tradition. But the point being is if we're going to start talking about, the hadith of the Holy Quran, and we're going to start talking about narrations that may allude that the Quran is corrupted, then, there's a plethora of narrations within Sunni literature which may indicate that, the verses of the Quran were tampered with, or, they were missing. I think, for example, the famous companion Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he didn't believe namely 2 particular surahs of the Holy Quran to be part of the Holy Quran. And, there's even difference of opinion of whether or not Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is something which is part of the Quran. What I'll do is maybe if later on I can bring up that narration to show you. So yeah, I don't know if any of you guys want to add anything to that, but
brothers, Brother Ryan, do you want to add anything?
Like we touched on in the last discussion, there's a lot of stigma about certain words. Right? So with like we had with the Shia and etc. There was other topics as well. We touched on other words. When it comes to and Sahaba, when it comes to tahrif, at the end of the day, all Muslims believe in a level of tahrif, right? When it comes to look at tahrif of the tafsir, the interpretation of the Quran, we wouldn't have different tafsirs if there wasn't that level of tahrif. Someone's distorted the meaning, and that's how we have different opinions. You know what I mean? So that has to be agreed upon by everyone. So when people hear the word tahrif, they need to stop having a little mini heart attacks and freaking out, because that's what's happening, right? And they need to stop saying that, firstly, that this is a Shia thing. Most Shia throughout history have not believed in this concept, right? At least today they don't believe in this concept, right? So if you look at the Quranis, for example, when you have Rashad Khalifa from, I believe he was originally from Masr, Egypt, and then became well known in America for his formula based on the number 19, which I've seen Salafi channels actually use to display it's a mathematical miracle of the Quran. The same guy who found this miracle actually used this miracle to say that there was tahrif in the Quran in regards to verses being added. So it's actually quite funny that I see the same people that say there is no tahrif will use the same evidences that someone else used to say that there is. So at the end of the day, is it kufr to believe in this concept? It depends on the level of tahrif that you believe in. And at the same time, you have to look at those who you take information from, such as the Sahaba and the Tabi'in and the Tabi'in and stuff like that, as to what they believed. And there wasn't conformity in opinion amongst them as to whether it existed or not. And so I think we've already inshallah ta'ala, I think videos will be coming out soon eventually regarding this topic, and will be touched on a lot more in depth. So I think it's best to leave it for that. But yeah, I think people really need to start getting over again another stigma that is just because of a certain word they automatically freak out. And we won't. And once these stigmas are actually broken down, these barriers are broken down, we can actually start to learn from each other a lot more and really start to assess this. Also, on top of this as well, I just want to clear up. There was Sunni scholars of the past, when talking about the concept of tahrif, when looking at the previous the previous books that came, such as the Injil and the Torah, etc., and the view of Tarif of those books. Some Sunni scholars actually said it wasn't actually in the writing itself, it was just the interpretation of it. I don't have those references on hand at the moment. Inshallah ta'ala, I can probably find them in the future and might have to add that to the series or whatever. But it's very important to look at that there hasn't ever been a real consensus on this. So, yeah, I think as I said, just get over this whole stigma. We all start, becoming a bit more objective when taking in your information, and hopefully we can all learn from each other and come to a conclusion eventually.
Thank you, Brother Ryan. Brother Abazar, do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, maybe we can add that there are quite a few Sunni narrations about Sahaba not having agreement on what is even part of the Quran. I mean, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was a recommended Sahabi by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when it's about the Quran, at least about the recitation. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam appreciated the recitation of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud a lot. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud had the opinion that Surah Falaq or Surah An-Nas are not part of the Quran. He said these are dua, these are not surahs of Quran. Then we have other narrations. I don't have the reference at hand. Also, I should have looked for that. But I remember one hadith, and I think this is also in the Sahihain, that Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, I think that was him, recited a surah and added that in the time of the Prophet there were more ayat in that surah, and that this surah was longer in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then we have Omar saying that the verses of stoning and breastfeeding were in the Quran and they used to recite it. And
I don't think Umar spoke on the issue of breastfeeding. To be fair, he spoke on the issue of stoning.
Rajam, maybe that might be true. Yeah, true. But at least he talked about that, and he said this is now missing and whatever. So I think we have indications that could point to the direction of some kind of tahrif or missing ayat in both narrations, both Sunni and Shia, and it depends on how we interpret them and if they are even accepted or not. And fully agree with Brother Ryan that there's a tahrif paranoia going on we should get over. I think that.
Can I just bring something up on the screen for everyone to have a look at? So this is from Tafsir ibn Kathir. Okay, if you just give me a second, if I can bring it up. Yeah. So this is from Tafsir ibn Kathir, and this is the commentary he gives on Surah Fatiha, and he says, "Bismillah is the first ayah of Al-Fatiha. The companions started the book of Allah with Bismillah." And he goes, the scholars also agree that Bismillah is part of an ayah in Surah An-Naml, and he says they disagree over whether it is separate ayah before every surah or if it's an ayah or part of an ayah included in every surah where Bismillah appears in its beginning. And then he says further, the opinion that Bismillah is an ayah of every surah except Al-Bara was attributed to the companions, Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar. So you can see that the Sahaba themselves, they had dispute or whether or not Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim was part of every surah of the Holy Quran, with the exception of Surah Fatiha. But having said that, if we say that, look, if adding anything to the Holy Quran is kufr, then what fatwa will we have for all those people who are printing these present versions of the Holy Quran, which include Bismillah at the start of every ayah?
They don't even agree regarding the Fatiha because the Malikis don't recite it, for example.
Yeah.
That's correct. They don't.
They don't. So yeah, should we crack on?
I think I was just looking. I think Brother Ryan also mentioned the fact that even in, I think you did as well say that about tarif in meaning, in the sense, it can create that sort of confusion, isn't it? I mean, different interpretations and understanding. Apologies, I won't be able to put a screenshot, but this is Ihya Ulumuddin by Ghazali, very famous book. I'm just looking at the English translation from volume 1, page 281. Even here it's talking about there are different opinions regarding the interpretation of some verses amongst the companions. It was not possible for them to be unanimous. Everybody did not interpret it after hearing it from the Prophet. If they said anything after hearing it from the Prophet, then their own opinions are fit to be rejected. It is well known that the interpreters extracted many meanings by applying their intellect. Even they had 7 interpretations of the abbreviated words at the beginning of a chapter. So how can it be said that they interpreted them by hearing everything from the Prophet? So this is just an example. The Sahaba, who were deemed as the best of generations for the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they didn't have an agreement on verses of the Quran. And technically, you could see if those verses were, had different interpretations, you could deem that as a form of tarif as well. You've sat in the midst of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, and yet you've not acquired a knowledge and understanding of verses of the Quran. So what can you say about that? If you're throwing these sort of criticisms at us, you really need to look at some of the materials in-house. And particularly on like the brothers have already touched on, Tarif, inshallah, we will discuss it in more depth in other shows, and you will see how their books are replete with examples of Tarif. And I know the sort of examples that say this proves that the Shias disrespect the Quran by ascribing to this concept of Tarif, but really we shouldn't be going down this line. There's a certain channel which is really vociferous in their criticism of us, and they're making a big issue of this. I'm telling you guys that it would have been best to avoid this topic, but because you have essentially,
I agree with you.
You guys have started, because they've said it. They dedicated their lives to saying the Shias are kafir because they believe in Tarif. You've left us with no other choice but to start bringing up this issue.
Yeah.
We didn't want to.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on that one, Saeed. I think,
and it's a shame, really, Saeed Ali. Do you remember? I think once when the channel was being set up, ourselves in discussions, we said we'll avoid this topic because, in truth, the only people that benefit from these topics are our enemies. Yeah. But these people had no shame.
They're shameless people.
They're the ones who've got no shame. They're the ones who are insisting the Shias are apostates because of X, Y, Z, or they believe that if you've left us, we've got no other choice now.
We've not even started come to their fiqh yet. Imagine if
exactly
about the fatwa, what the scholars said in amount of jurisprudence in terms of. I just mentioned the tradition of the suckling, the verse of suckling, which they believe in adult breastfeeding. Do they really want to start discussing what their books have said about, and they talk about disrespecting the wives of the Prophet? Do they even know what their scholars have said about the wives of the Prophet?
Absolutely. They need to look at their own books.
Let's carry on.
Sorry, guys, can I just interject quickly? Just in regards to this topic and the videos we've done on Tawheed, those of opposing schools who believe that the Quran is eternal, right? Of course, that mentality is going to push them away from even looking at the idea of tahrif. Because they can't comprehend the concept of something that's eternal alongside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being flawed. It's impossible for them to comprehend. So they don't even look at it, even objectively, they can't look at it because it's been bred in them. And even if tahrif doesn't exist, they can't even look at it. They have to push it away straight away because this idol that they've created would then be flawed. So that's the last thing I'm going to say on that matter. And inshallah, when the videos come out, a lot more truth can be shed on it.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, brothers, for that clarification. I'm just looking at the time. We've only answered 2 questions and we're 1 hour in. Okay, the next topic. This is a particular favourite amongst those who are critics of Shia Islam, and that's temporary marriage. What is Mut'ah? What does it mean, and why do Shias believe in its legitimacy?
Pass on to Sheikh Ryan. Sheikh
Ryan, could you expand on that, please?
Astaghfirullah, please don't call me Sheikh. Okay, so what is Mut'ah? Nikah Mut'ah. One, it's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is. Second of all, was it performed by the Sahaba? Yes. The Sunni narrations state that it was forbade at Khaybar, from my memory, correct?
Correct.
Khaybar? Yeah. And on that day also, so was donkey meat and garlic. Right? So now I ask, why do so many Muslims eat garlic? Is garlic still forbidden?
Exactly.
Is it? Because the lebs are screwed. if the Lebanese and so many Middle Eastern cuisines, they're screwed because there's so much garlic there. When it comes to, some will say, no, it was banned, it remains banned, or etc., etc. Then why did Abu Bakr allow it when he was in power? It was then banned again by Omar. These are according to Sunni narrations. You know what I mean? So there seems to be an inconsistency here. All right. And I believe it's from a general point of view, like the majority point of view. I think only the 12ers are the one who majority believe that Mut'ah is still permissible. But at the same time, you still will find numerous scholars from other schools permitting it. Whether they permit it as being completely halal or, they don't recommend it, but it's still being halal, there's still that element there. So once again, this thing is brought up, but people don't look at their own books. And then it's really dangerous that certain people do this, because whether it's done out of ignorance or just they're disingenuous, once they say this and they use it as an attack on us, other people from their school will then do their own research and see that there's been lying going on to them. You know what I mean? And that's when you see people swapping schools. You know what I mean? It happened with other people that are now Shia. I'm sure Brother Daniel might have something to say about that. But yeah, when it comes to Mut'ah, it was performed by Sahaba. It was allowed by the Prophet up to a certain event. But then after his death, it was still performed. So were these Sahaba in the wrong? Was Abu Bakr not aware of it being banned? You know what I mean? It's very confusing concept, but that they've banned it. But
can I add to that?
Actually, Sayyid Ali, one second.
Sure.
Can I just add one point here, please? In terms of the definition, if people don't understand, Mut'ah is a form of nikah, but it's for a temporary period of time. So, for example, whereas the traditional understanding of nikah obviously is a permanent from life till death, this is where you specify a period of time in which a man and a woman will be married. In terms of its legitimacy, we have very clear examples from the books of Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam not only allowed it, there's traditions in Sunni Muslim where he told Sahaba to do it.
Prostitution, though, Sayyid.
This is the thing. Now, this is the thing. Unfortunately, a lot of nonsense that's being bandied about is Mut'ah is defined as prostitution, and it's defined as fornication. So really, the question that I'd like to ask these people who use this sort of terminology when they define Mut'ah, then are you telling us that there was a period of time when the Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, was telling his companions to sleep with prostitutes and to fornicate? Are you telling us that the religion of purity,
well, they do.
the religion of Allah subhanahu wa
They
ta'ala,
try to argue that it was it's the same case of alcohol. It was allowed and then it was forbidden.
at no point did Rasulullah, this is my challenge, okay? I always say this, alcohol was allowed. When we say allowed, Rasulullah, okay, the alcohol is abrogated slowly over a certain period of time. We accept that. Was there ever a time where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ever declared, right, let's go out and have some alcohol today? Just a question. Did he ever tell his Sahaba, I tell you what, whatever the occasion is, today is a really good day, let's go and have a drink? Astaghfirullah. I'm just simply saying there's a difference. With Mut'ah, there's clear tradition in Sahih Muslim where he told the Sahaba, he gave an order for them to contract Mut'ah.
Yeah.
Do you understand? So
with
look
alcohol,
at the difference.
With alcohol as well, bear in mind, with alcohol, it's something that was even forbidden in the previous scriptures. According to the Shias, the 12 Shias, alcohol was never deemed halal at any point anyway. But yeah, when we come to the issue of Mut'ah, what is it? It's temporary marriage, and it was allowed during the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. The narrative suggests that it was prohibited at Khaybar, even after Khaybar, it was allowed and still practiced. I want to quickly bring up a narration. You should be able to see my screen. So just in case, I don't want the viewers to accuse me of anything after. Just give me a second. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, just give me a second. I'm just trying to bring up the narration of. I've just shared some. I've just. Sorry. I was told very last minute some of these questions, so I quickly prepared some links online for people to quickly read as well. So can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
So look what the chapter says. The chapter Mut'ah marriage. It was permitted, then abrogated, then permitted, then abrogated, and it will remain forbidden until the day of resurrection. So this narration is actually taken from Shia Muslim, and the reference is there at the bottom. So what they say is that, look, Mut'ah was permitted during the time of the Prophet, and on the Battle of Khaybar, he prohibited it, even though it was something which was allowed again, and that it was allowed up until his farewell Hajj, actually, according to some traditions. So if you look at this tradition, it says, Jabir ibn Abdullah reported, we contracted temporary marriage, giving a handful of tails or flour as dowry during the lifetime of Allah's messenger, and during the time of Abu Bakr, until Umar forbid it in the case of Amr ibn Hurayth. So you could see that, so one of the arguments they try to use here is that, well, it was haram, but it wasn't actually until the time of Umar when it was actually totally abrogated. But even then, they fall into other problems. And what I mean by this is, so let me just take it off screen so you can actually see me. So yeah, so what they claim is that basically it was haram until Umar completely prohibited the people from doing it. Now, what's interesting is when Umar mentions the issue of Mut'ah marriage, he doesn't just mention the prohibition of Mut'ah marriage. He also mentions the prohibition of the Hajj, the combining of Hajj and Umrah. Okay, so what's interesting is the general Sunni brothers, they would say, okay, well, we consider Mut'ah marriage to be, haram on the statement of what Umar said, but obviously what the Prophet said, but obviously what Umar said as well, because he's the rightly guided Khalifa for them. But they don't follow him when it comes to the issue of combining the Hajj and Umrah together, right? Even though it's exactly the same narration. And we know from the Holy Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed the Muslims to combine the Hajj and Umrah together. So Umar's statement was actually in direct violation with ayats of the Holy Quran, which permit the combining of Hajj and Umrah. But having said that, there was also ikhtilaf amongst the Sahaba. For example, Ibn Abbas, he believed in its legitimacy, and
all his life,
and not just Ibn Abbas. You had even Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and he said that doing Mut'ah, he didn't consider it haram, but he considered it permitted under extreme circumstances. He said it's makruh. Okay, so something which is makruh again is not something which is considered to be haram in Sharia. I think Imam Malik as well, there's some statement of Maliki scholars who've also mentioned the legitimacy of temporary marriage. But isn't it interesting that now they've even innovated other types of, so-called temporary marriage? They call it misyar, traveler's marriage, which again is based on nothing but deception, where you contract, what you call a permanent marriage with a woman, but your intention is to divorce her. The only difference is you don't make it apparent to the woman that you're going to divorce her after you consummate the marriage. So it's kind of a form of deception and trickery, So
it is a form of deception.
It's a big topic, and I think again this requires a separate series just on this.
But just point out one thing. I just came in my mind that if the argument is that Mut'ah is essentially having illegal relations with prostitutes, they should remember that Abu Bakr's daughter Asma practiced Mut'ah, and from that she had a relationship with Zubair, and Abdullah ibn Zubair was born from that. So they really should be very careful about what they say.
Well, they say that was a different type of Mut'ah, by the way. They say that was a Mut'ah of Hajj. So
really? So how was he conceived then?
I have no idea, but that's a good question.
Exactly. I do wonder that, because how was he born then? Because that was one of the narrations of Abdullah ibn Abbas, and Ibn Zubair had a row of this very issue, and Ibn Abbas said, go and ask your mother about it.
They say Ijma Sahaba, the general consensus was that it was prohibited, but again, why didn't Ibn Abbas, why didn't he share that same opinion? Because clearly he was not part of the Ijma, and he didn't agree with the Ijma.
In fact, there's a body of Sahaba which were against it. Were pro. They said Mut'ah had not been abrogated.
Yeah.
There were a large number of Sahaba.
I believe there is a narration in Shia Muslim, which mentions that the Prophet, and peace and blessings be upon him, on the day of Khaybar, said he prohibited it up till the Day of Judgment. But again, we fall into the issue of conflicting narrations, and even the imams for the Sunnis like Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he probably didn't consider this narration to be sound, because had it been haram, then he wouldn't have issued a fatwa permitting it under extreme circumstances. So anyway,
actually, say the 7 times it was abrogated 7 times.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It was permitted up until the time of the Prophet, and then again it was practiced in the time of Abu Bakr, and when it comes to time of Umar, he apparently he stopped it. But they would argue, oh well, what it was always haram, but Umar didn't fully
implement it.
Yeah, implement that that act. But again, this is a huge topic. I don't know if Brother Danny wants to quickly mention anything really quickly. I probably covered most of the points he was going to mention.
Just quickly that maybe to be fair, there might be some abuse of Mut'ah, so to say, that people will do just for fun, jumping from one temporary marriage to the other, which wouldn't be haram, but maybe it's not a good thing. And Aima alayhim salam also said, okay, maybe don't jump from, I recall a hadith from Al-Kafi where they said, okay, if you already have a fixed marriage, then don't scare your wives away from us, from our path of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, by jumping from one Mut'ah to another. So having said that, but some people do that, and but still we also see that, especially among Salafis, people would jump from one marriage to another marriage, and they would just not fix their time, but everybody know, okay, they would just want to have some fun. And I've seen this when I was a Sunni numerous times that some brother was, I'm married, oh yeah, who's the sister, don't worry, I will divorce her after 2 weeks. And people were going on just like that, and they would just not fix in a time limit. So it would be really better to see their own abuse of fixed marriage before criticizing us for abusing fixed or temporary marriage, because marriage is marriage. If you fix a time limit or not, you should not. You should deal with each other respectfully if you choose to marry each other. We could get deeper into that, but abuse can come from everything. So we can also abuse gaining wealth. We can gain wealth; it's allowed, but we can also abuse gaining wealth.
Absolutely. All because something is abused, it doesn't mean that practice should be outlawed.
True.
Because obviously, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed something, we're not in a position to then give a view to say, it should be practiced in this day and age. The fact of the matter is, the provision is there. If people abuse it, that's down to them. I don't think that, you're wrong to try and stop it on that basis.
Use any type of marriage. I think Brother Ryan wanted to say something. Ryan?
Yes, Brother Ryan.
Yeah. Thank you. Just to touch on what you guys are saying, it's all just about with marriage, it's a great responsibility. You know what I mean? So, Mut'ah is a type of marriage.
You sound like Superman, Dave. With great powers.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Get your superheroes, right?
Yeah, I know.
We all have the ability to be superheroes. But yeah, it's all about responsibility. You know what I mean? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's given us this responsibility, and it's about how we go about, using it and applying it in everyday life. When there's marriage, it's not just you that's married. You're married to your spouse. So the same thing that we have to look at when it comes to Mut'ah, we have to also look at with polygamy. And the amount of people that from numerous schools in Islamic thought who abuse polygamy. And the same thing, you could be like the Nazari Ismailis, for example, they completely have got rid of both, to my knowledge. You know what I mean? We don't believe in that. We don't believe the Sharia can be abrogated. And for the same thing, you see Salafis, they will make videos in support of polygamy, just as we do, but at the same time, that can be abused. So the same thing with Mut'ah, it can be abused. So it's really down onto the person. At the end of the day, the person's getting judged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if they don't want to take the religion seriously, they're going to be dealt with eventually for it. But let's not tag again with another stigma, you know what I mean? And just as soon as you hear the word Mut'ah, that's automatically a bad thing. You know what I mean? We have to actually look at scripture, and we have to try to rationalize it and see why it's there, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, can I also add the fact that, certainly we're living in society as we are right now, you certainly can see the benefits of it as well. We are living in society. I think perhaps in the old days it was a different concept, but now you do have people going out, dating, etc., which isn't really an Islamic concept, like couples getting to know one another. Fact of the matter is, if something is done in an Islamic way, remember another point, that there's just an assumption mut'ah automatically means sexual intercourse, which is wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that. Mut'ah is simply a halal means by which a man and a woman are in a relationship.
There is another halal way.
Sorry?
There is another halal way.
Also, one more thing.
Yeah.
One more thing. There's a narration that I believe both us and the Sunnis have in regards to when two people are alone, it's not actually just the two of them. The third with them is shaitan, right? So when you engage in a mut'ah contract, right, it's a contract that you are married. So that third person is no longer there. You know what I mean? So, you know, some people can say, "Oh, alhamdulillah, I've never been alone with a non-mahram woman before, so this doesn't apply to me." But come on, people that are throwing these stones at us, they really need to reassess themselves and think: Have they been alone with a person from the other opposite sex that's not mahram? And if so, was there a contract to confirm it? These laws and rulings, as I've already said at the very beginning, they're a blessing to us, and they make us more aware of what we're getting ourselves into, and that we are not only signing a contract with each other, but with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this will be used against us on the Day of Judgment if we were to misuse it. And that's what it goes.
Yeah,
I think Hassan Bahri, I think one day we need to perhaps do like a show on Ibn Qayyim's rulings on how to relieve yourself from.
Exactly. Yeah. There are. I think it'll have to be after 10 o'clock. I think we'll have to have some ratings on some of these.
Well, I think it'll have to be after 11 o'clock.
Exactly. It would be for. We'd have to put a sort of certificate. No children shall be viewing this show. If we went into the fiqh issues, believe me, there would be problems. But I think that kind of covers it. I mean, like I said, I just wanted to mention that fact that, you know, because nowadays you have this concept of dating, couples getting to know one another, you know, which is fine. But like we say, that there's a way to do it, there's a way not to do it. And you know, unfortunately, increasingly we hear, you know, people do end up engaging in, you know, un-Islamic acts. So at least Mut'ah provides that protection. That if you are in a relationship, it's a halal one. Okay, over to the next question. This is for you, Sayyid Ali. What is the doctrine of Taqiyyah? What does it mean? Does it mean lying?
Okay, well, Taqiyyah was done in order to. Well, the idea behind Taqiyyah is to protect your own life, depending on the scenario and situation you're in. If you're about to get killed, a Muslim has a right to hide their identity. So just say, for example, I don't know, you can be in the middle of nowhere and some guy pulls out a gun and says, "Listen, are you a Muslim?" And you have a choice here. You can either say, "Yes, I am," and be martyred, or alternatively, you can denounce your faith and say you're not a Muslim. So this is ultimately what Taqiyyah is. It's not a necessity in religion, but the option is there. Okay. And there's verses of the Holy Quran and there's historical evidences where, for example, the famous companion Ammar ibn Yasir, in the earlier period of Islam, he was about to get killed, and he denounced his faith, and later he went to the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, and explained the situation and circumstances of why he denounced the religion. And the Prophet permitted him to do this under that particular situation. So yeah, that's what ultimately Taqiyyah is. It's a means to protect yourself depending on the situation and scenario. But again, it shouldn't be confused with hypocrisy and lying, because unfortunately nowadays we do get people who try to misuse Taqiyyah for the wrong purposes. Definitely.
Okay, anything else?
Daniel wants to come on that one, or?
Yeah. Oh, Daniel?
I think it's all said. Yeah, I think it's they make a huge issue out of it, but that's basically what it is. Yeah, protect yourself. And the Shia were persecuted. The followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam were persecuted. Like, wow, it was really sad if you look into history. I mean, just like happened 200 years ago. When you look at what the Wahhabis did in Karbala, the sack of Karbala. Everybody can read that, so I don't. I mean, we don't have to wonder why, especially the followers of Ahl Bayt alayhim salam had to resort to taqiyya. Because if we look
Absolutely.
at history, then we can turn this around and see, okay, why were people forced to hide their faith? Why was that? And
Yeah.
then probably the ones who accuse us for having used taqiyya in the past, or sometimes still having to use it. If you look at Pakistan or Afghanistan, there are many areas where people have to resort to taqiyya or get killed. So what is the
Exactly.
is this our problem, or is it the problem of some psychopath extremists who would kill people for their beliefs?
Yeah. Very good point. Very good point. I mean, if you look at the scenario, I mean, I think Shibli Nomari is one of the. It's called Shamsul Hind. He wrote very extensive sort of books on the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, from Al Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and he mentions that on the collection of hadith material, he goes that hadiths were collected during the era of the Bani Umayyads, when Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam was cursed from the mosque pulpits, yeah, from Sindh in India through to Spain. So this went on to, I think it says 90 years. So you could imagine if you was a Shia living in those sort of circumstances, how would you survive? Would you, anybody who challenged the state in any shape or form would be killed? We have the example even early on during the era of Muawiyah. Hujr bin Adi stood up, and what was his end? He was murdered. His companions, and that was because they opposed the cursing of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And that the fact of the matter is, the history of Shiism has been one of oppression, which is why the Imams have said that the best option, when you're facing oppression, is do taqiyya. And I don't see anything objectionable on that. It's just a
But
rational way.
again, say this:
Yeah,
it's the circumstances which permit it,
yeah,
and really it's down to the individual to decide, when to do taqiyya and when not to do taqiyya. It's
yeah.
interesting. I remember a fatwa of Ibn Taymiyyah in his book. I believe it's in Mujam al-Fatawa, and he says that one can even bow down to an idol, and he can even, he can submit and bow down to a statue, an idol, um, and he considers this to be a taqiyya. In fact, Ibn Hajar Asqalani, in his famous book commentary of Sahih Bukhari, Fath Bari, he also mentions taqiyya and when it's permitted, when it's allowed. So generally speaking, the Muslims don't really disagree with the concept of taqiyya. It comes more down to the application of it. Um, yeah, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Hassan Bari, I don't know. Ryan, did you want to say anything to that, or?
Yeah, just quickly. So, to my knowledge, taqiyyah is essentially dissimulation, and in order to protect oneself, or I think there's been some cases where it's been to protect, someone close to them, or et cetera, et cetera. It's usually just in life or death situations where one has to do it. There's been what usually gets put onto us is taqiyya is a Shia thing, and that they use it to misguide people or to hide their alleged Zoroastrian roots or some absolute horse crap. But it's one. Let's go firstly. It's a very human thing, right? And it's very understandable. What if is every one of these people that accuse us of this being just a bad thing, like we're just doing it all the time to lie? If they were put into a life or death situation, they wouldn't lie to protect themselves or their children or their wife. You know what I mean? It's just absurd. They strip all the humanity away from Islam, and they've been left with this dirty, disgusting, filthy ideology, which leaves people's heads getting chopped off in the Middle East. You know what I mean? Essentially, so I see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a clear distinction between lying and taqiyya. You know what I mean? It's dissimulation. And if you look back at history as well, I was reading something, Ismailis were saying that many Shia would often go into hiding as Sufis. And this kind of is seen in their beliefs. It's kind of half Sunni, half Shia in their views. So it's kind of like this, some would say, half-assed ideology. But that I think really rings true as to this time and place that the people back then were in, where if they were truly to speak on their views, they would be killed. So from a human perspective, I think this whole thing about Taqiyyah as a concept being horrible or bad or un-Islamic is stupid. When it comes to people saying that, you know, some people misuse Taqiyyah to do this or that, yeah, if people are misusing Taqiyyah, I have a big problem with that as well. But we need to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to judge us all. So if people are misusing anything that He has given us, such as a blessing, such as the ones that mentioned before, or even Taqiyyah, then they'll be dealt with. And that's going to be, at the end of the day, the biggest... Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most merciful, but He's also going to be the most soundest of judges. So, yeah.
I was going to add a comment on this. Actually, Brother Abzar, did you comment? You commented, didn't you, on Taqiyyah? Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I said something about it. Yeah.
I was just going to say, also on Taqiyyah, I find it quite amusing that these guys that don't believe in Taqiyyah, they don't mind using it to get a British passport, because part of that involves pledging allegiance to the Queen. So it's quite okay, yeah, to get a passport and do Taqiyyah and sort of, you know, it's just an example of their hypocrisy. They go around doing Taqiyyah. These guys also get those which are arrested and involved in terrorism. They never own up to it. They'll start using Taqiyyah and saying, "Oh no, I didn't do it. You know, I'm innocent, governor. Don't blame me." I mean, do you want to add something? Actually, say that the funny thing is, you know, let's talk about Taqiyyah versus lying. I don't really see how they can sort of fire shots at us when they believe that Hazrat Ibrahim's a liar.
Yeah, they do. They believe, according to the tradition of Sahih Bukhari, they believe that when Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam was confronted by Namrud, when he took a liking for Prophet Ibrahim's wife, I believe it was Sarah, and the tradition suggests that you know, Namrud asked Ibrahim alayhi salam, "Who's this woman?" According to the tradition in Bukhari, it says he lied on three occasions, I believe, and one of those occasions was on this, and it was the fact that he denied his own wife and claimed it was his sister. So yeah, so if you want to talk about lying, then, you know, again, you know, according to them, the prophets lied. Now, which goes into the whole issue that if they were capable of lying on those particular circumstances, what else could they possibly lie about, you know? So yeah, I think we've kind of covered it in the issue of Taqiyyah. I mean, it's a huge topic, and you know, I think it needs to be approached from a historical point of view to see when it first emerged, how it was implemented, what the scholars said, what the Shia scholars said. And that's about it. I don't know if you want to add anything else before we move on to the next one.
Yeah, maybe one thing, because actually Sunnis have a narration, and I think we also have this narration, but it says lying is permissible in 3 situations: when your life is threatened, in war, and in marriage. And so
no, I think the narration says lying is permitted under 3 circumstances: in order to bring peace between 2 people. That's one of them. Sure. Lying to your wife. In other words, not upsetting her over something. I don't know, she might have some bad cooking and you may turn around and be like, "No, your cooking is amazing." And I believe the third one, I can't recall, but again, I don't want to misquote. But yeah, I mean, they do, you know, they have a tradition that says war is deception.
Yeah.
And yeah, even though they'll accuse Shias of Taqiyyah and lying and stuff, etc., but you know, we could quite easily throw it back at them and ask them why they believe prophets lied. And yeah, so
true.
Awesome, bro. Next one.
I think it's all to do with circumstances as well, isn't it? I mean, I think you touched on the example of Ammar bin Yasir. There's a verse which specifically deals with the concept of Taqiyyah. His parents were the first shaheed in Islam, weren't they? Because they stood up to oppression. They lost their lives. Ammar bin Yasir opted to use Taqiyyah.
By the way, it's funny because did you know that when Ammar bin Yasir's parents were being tortured, the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, literally just passed by and he didn't even help him. So he practiced a form of Taqiyyah himself. You know, they say, "Oh, look, you know, why didn't Ali alayhi salam protect his wife? You know, was he a coward, the lion of God?" And yet, if you look at their books, you know, you see examples where, prophets, stood back, like the case of Prophet Ibrahim, which I mentioned, which man would not protect the honor of his wife? According to Ibn Hajar Asqalani, it says that he, Namrud made intention to actually rape his wife, and he knew that there was a possibility of his wife being raped, and yet he's a prophet of God, and he didn't protect the honor of his wife, But they don't level criticism to Ibrahim alayhi salam, they'll level criticism on Imam Ali, because obviously they have that nasb inside them,
Exactly. Yeah. That's what it comes down to.
The Prophet ﷺ said, do not find faults in Ali, yet these guys seem to find every single fault there is possible against him, But yeah, so
Exactly.
Can we just move on to the next point, please?
Okay, the next question. I was thinking we've only got essentially half an hour. This might well cover half an hour now. This what is the Shia position on the wives of the Prophet, peace be upon him and his family? Sayyid Ali, you can open this one up. I'm gonna obviously contribute, but you can start the ball rolling.
I can see Daniel anxiously nodding his head.
Okay, let's get brother.
No, I'm just excited because it's such an interesting topic, and please start, Said.
Sayyid Ali, you start then.
I mean, the Shia position regarding the wives of the Prophet, may peace and blessing be upon him and his family, is the same as the Holy Quran. Okay, those wives who are submitting, God-fearing, we praise them, we love them, we respect the wives of the Prophet. And obviously, likewise, those wives of the Prophet who weren't God-fearing and disobeyed Allah and His Messenger, we do not consider them we don't consider them highly. If we go to the Holy Quran, for example, we look at Surah Tahrim, Surah 66 of the Holy Quran. There's a beautiful moral there, and there's an example for all of us to learn from. I believe it's in Surah 66, verse 10, when it mentions, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the wives of Noah and Lot, who were from the most righteous servants of Allah. However, their wives disobeyed them. Okay, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that these wives of Noah and Lot, they would basically perish in hellfire till eternity. So yeah, I mean, the Shia, again, the Shia view of the wives of the Prophet is the same as the Holy Quran. There's examples of wives of the Prophet who even apostated. For example, the Holy Prophet Muhammad had a wife called Qutayla bint Qais, and many people don't know much about her, and I would really recommend the viewers to go out and read her biography. She was a woman who was married to the Holy Prophet. According to some traditions, it says that she never consummated the marriage, and nevertheless she apostated and she left Islam. So would we respect such a woman? Would we respect a woman who's apostated and left Islam? Well, I mean, what is the ruling on somebody who apostates and leaves the religion? I know people try to argue, oh well, she didn't consummate the marriage with the Prophet. Irrespective, she was still a wife of the Prophet. The Prophet divorced her, and she left the religion. And according to some accounts, I believe Abu Bakr and Umar even made threats to burn a house down. I think Mohib al-Dabri wrote a book called The Wives of the Prophet, and he mentions it in there. He mentions how there was a dispute between Abu Bakr and Umar whether or not to burn a house down. So yeah, I mean, that is just the general viewpoint of the Shias regarding the wives of the Prophet. I don't know if any of you guys want to add anything to that. I'll come back maybe later on and elaborate. I'll let you go ahead, Daniel, if you want.
Yeah, when you mentioned the sancticity, is that correct in English? Sancticity, something
authenticity.
Something is very important, holy, untouchable. Then we find narrations. I think it's in Tariq al-Tabari, and I forgot the other source, but it actually has a Sahih chain. And Omar attacked the house of Aisha once when they held the mourning ceremony for Abu Bakr.
It's in Sahih Bukhari, and Ibn Hajar Asqalani mentions it in his commentary to Sahih
the actual
Bukhari.
incident. Yeah,
he says that yes, the wives of the Prophet were, or they had a gathering to mourn the death of the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him.
No, death of Abu Bakr, wasn't it?
Bakr, yes.
No, on both occasions. I believe
it happened twice.
twice.
Okay, make it better.
I don't believe it just once. I mean, again, on the issue of mourning, I know people like to say, oh, the sect is just based upon kufriyat and etc. etc. and
Zindiqat or whatever they say.
zindiqat and shirkiyat and whatever, khurafat or whatever. But
Whatever rhymes.
the sect, yeah, whatever rhymes, and the sect is based upon crying, etc., etc. But no, you know, again, if we go according to history, you'd see examples of, you know, the wives of the Prophet, or you know, organizing mourning gatherings, and there was even dispute amongst the Sahaba when it comes to Ibn Umar confronting Aisha and saying to her that, look, you know, it was prohibited to cry for the dead, and Aisha corrected him and said, listen, you're mistaken here. This is not the case. But yeah, I don't want to interrupt, brother Daniel. Come back on, please. Carry on.
Yeah, I mean, like what happened was that Omar had this house stormed by his minions, and all the people come out, and he lashed Abu Bakr's sister in front of Aisha's house. So much to the sanctity of the houses, and maybe we can mention the title Ummahatul Mu'minin, because I feel like this is a very important thing, because
Yeah, very good point.
even some Shias get it wrong. They will say like, oh no, they are our mothers and we have to love them and respect them just like our physical mother, but I don't think that is the case, right?
But Daniel, even then, look, let's look at it from a logical perspective. How can they physically be your mother? If they were if they were physically mothers to us, or even if they were physically mothers to the Sahaba of the time, then they would not be ordered to conduct hijab in front of other Sahaba. We know from Surah Azab, whenever the Sahaba used to enter the house of the Prophet, they needed to seek permission. Okay, and even then they were ordered to speak behind the veil to the wives of the Prophet. Okay, which makes you think, what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala see in the hearts of some of these individuals that he instructed them to speak to the women behind a curtain? Okay, so yeah, we don't take al-Mu'mineen to mean something literal. And especially, I mean, if that was the case, then this whole suckling business wouldn't be there. And you know, there would be so many other issues.
There'd be no need. There'd be no need to. You're right. There'd be no need for a hijab, would there? You know, I mean,
yeah, of course.
I don't mean hijab is in hair covering. There'd be no need to.
When we say al-Mu'mineen, we're talking about prohibition of marriage, and all commentators of the Holy Quran, they mention that, you know, this is in reference to prohibition of marriage. Okay, you know, it doesn't literally mean that they're your mothers. But yes, of course, again, we respect the God-fearing ones. The ones who are not God-fearing, you know, we don't think of them very highly. No.
But Sayyid Ali, in the same way, you can't. The reason that they're regarded as your mothers in that context is because you can't marry them, just like you can't marry your own mothers. That's why Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has revealed that verse. They are your mothers. So that, you know.
By the way, did you know that
there's a clear demarcation here between the believer and Nabi Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's wives. They are your mothers. So there's no chance that you will ever marry those women.
Yeah.
And in fact, so there's also narrations in the books of Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah that there's incidents where other women approached Aisha and said, they referred to her as al-Mu'mineen.
Yeah.
And she corrected them.
Yeah, she goes, I'm not the
mother. She said, I am not. Yeah. I am not your mother. I am the mother of your men. Okay? Which in itself says, first of all, we see that it's restricted. The title is restricted to men, and obviously, even she's making it clear it's restricted to men for a reason. These
by the way,
are because you can't marry them.
I have seen rebuttals against that. I remember some people trying to weaken some traditions that suggest, oh no, it's not just restricted to motherhood of men. It's restricted. It also applies to the women as well. Again, you know. Why would you even do that? Why would you even weaken such a narration? Yes, we respect the wives, those who are God-fearing, and you know, those who turned out to be like Qutayla bint Qais, who apostated and left the religion, regardless of whether or not they consummate their marriage. And by the way, Qutayla bint Qais, according to them, married Ikramah. I believe, I might be mistaken on this, but she married Ikramah. which again, it makes you think what these guys were doing at the time. You know, why didn't they even stop such a marriage from taking place and stuff? So yeah, I don't know if brother Ryan wants to add anything on that. He's gone into a hiding.
Yeah, no, I do actually. It was funny. I was watching a video the other day of an Irish sister doing a reaction video of Ali Dawah talking to Sheikh Haytham in the UK about voting, and she kept banging on about, they keep talking about their own personal opinions, but they didn't give Quran and Sunnah, give evidence from Quran and Sunnah. She kept going on and on and on about it, right? And that's good. People are hungry. They want knuckle, right? So with that said, show me where it says that mothers of the believers have to be believers themselves.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
where does it say that?
You could have a Muslim whose mother is not a believer. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when they bang on about this, they will also say to us, you know,
I noticed they like to play on people's emotions. Oh my God, look at him! He disrespected the wife of the Prophet. Astaghfirullah. You know, so they like to have this emotional. They like to I've noticed this behavior. They like to act on people's emotion to get them really emotional and worked up. You know, and you've probably seen this yourself as well. You probably experienced it. You know.
So yeah, I have, and of course they're going to be this emotional about it, because once you start downplaying Aisha and Hafsa, you start losing, especially Aisha, and you discredit her. That then goes away those narrations from her. You know what I mean? A lot of them anyway. So their whole ideology has a very strong foundation based on her narrations. You know what I mean? So they can't afford to lose that.
Yeah.
So they play this. Oh, how can you say that about the wife of the Prophet, and etc. etc. Well, hold on. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala Himself refers to wives of other prophets, you know what I mean, as being misguided, etc. etc. So
ironically, in the same chapter as well, that mentions why. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when it comes to that, I remember what was it? There was they talk about as well where the two hearts are deviated in the Quran. It talks about where
Surah Tarif.
I'll bring it up for you, Ryan.
Yes, please do. I'll just whilst you're looking for it, I'll just make commentary. There's so there's obviously this ayah in the Quran where it excuse me, where it talks about two wives of the Prophet and their hearts deviated, and then it talks about if they repent, etc., etc. Right. So we tafsir. Yeah. So what's sure.
So basically, really quickly, as Ryan was mentioning, the background about this particular surah, Surah 66 of the Holy Quran, is that the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him and his family, used to visit the house of Zainab bint Jash, and he used to drink, he used to have honey at her house. So what happened was two of his wives, namely Aisha and Hafsa, they conspired in his absence. And they made a plan that when the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, was to return, one of them was to say that they could smell something from him, something which was not appropriate, something which was unpleasant. So when the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, returned, one of the wives stepped forward and she said, "Where have you been? You smell like you don't smell nice." So the Prophet at that point onwards, he prohibited himself from eating that honey, and at this point, this ayat of the Holy Quran was revealed, and I'm going to quickly bring it up for the viewers to read. And it's still in Surah 66 of the Holy Quran. And as Ryan mentioned, the Quran says in this particular ayah, I'll bring up the verse. It says, "O you two wives, repent to Allah. It's best for your hearts have deviated." Now, if Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is saying that these two wives of the prophets, their hearts have deviated, what does this mean? You know, what fatwa would you have on Allah for the statement? All right, I mean, you can continue on. I mean, if you want to.
Yeah. So we can see here that it's a fact. You can't deny that their hearts deviated. That's it. Especially, but it says two wives' hearts deviated. Then you read tafsir, and it states that it was Hafsa and Hafsa bint Umar and Aisha bint Abi Bakr. It was them. Okay, so of course they're fallible human beings. They can go this way or that way, whatever. That's the argument. Now I want you to find me any evidence any evidence using Quran and Sunnah, authentic evidence, that they actually did repent for that.
Ryan, actually, can I just mention a very important point here? In this chapter, I mean, the chapter, the surah is called the surah of prohibition, Surah Tahrim. And you know, I just want to read some verses, if that's okay. It says, "O Prophet, why do you prohibit yourself from what Allah has made lawful for you, seeking the approval of your wives, and Allah is the forgiving, the merciful?" And you know, just if you, the viewers need to take the time and actually read the verses, quite powerful verses. And it says in, for example, hey, Surah 66:4. If you two wives repent to Allah, it's best for your hearts have deviated. But if you cooperate against him, then indeed Allah is his protector, and Jibreel and the righteous of the believers and the angels, moreover, are his assistants. Then it carries on. It says, this one here, Surah 66:5. Perhaps his Lord divorced you. Did you know that according to the tradition, I believe it's mentioned in Sunnah ibn Majah, it actually says that be upon him, divorced Hafsa. He actually divorced Hafsa.
One talaq, with one talaq.
With one talaq, and then she returned home, and then Umar became really upset about it. And literally, he went and he begged the Prophet to take her back. So, and look, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, look, perhaps the Lord, if he divorced you, would substitute for him wives better than you? What does that mean? That means that there were women in the Ummah at the time who were better than these two wives. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had threatened them with divorce, and in fact did divorce one of his wives. And later again, if we carry on in this very chapter, in Surah 66:10, it comes back to the verse which we mentioned about the wives of Noah and Lot, who were mentioned in the same chapter. And it says, Allah presents an example for those who disbelieve. The wife of Noah and the wife of Lot. They were under two of the righteous servants, but betrayed them. So those prophets did not avail them from Allah at all. And it was said, enter the fire with those who enter. Now, some may argue, well, okay, you know, these wives got really jealous. And, you know, according to the Imams alayhi salam, they said that, you know, a woman, she becomes jealous out of love. Well, it's interesting because the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt also mentioned that when a husband becomes jealous of his wife, there's a sense of haya there. But when a woman becomes jealous of her husband, then it becomes seriously problematic. And more importantly, this is the Holy Prophet of Islam, you know, this is the last and final messenger, you know, and to conspire against the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him. You know, if you're capable of lying to the Holy Prophet, you know, how can you be trusted in anything else you say, you know? So it goes back to that point. But yeah, I just wanted that point. I apologize, Ryan, for interrupting.
No, it's good. You helped me. Teamwork. But no, that's the exact point. They can't prove that these women, based on Quran and Sunnah, were actually repented on this, that even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us as an example to the end of times to show, you know, how they deviated and etc. How he compared it to that of the wives of Noah and Lot. May peace and blessing be upon them both. Not the wives, obviously, the Prophet. And so I just find this really odd. It comes down to, once again, there's another stigma. You can't say anything bad about these women. They were wives of the Prophet. They gave us so much knowledge and etc. etc. They helped build Islam. No, they didn't. If you look at the narrations, right, it is, and with an objective mind, right, they aren't doing that at all. The Quran clearly states, if you want to use the Quran as a nas over everything, and it's a proof of everything else, you take Quran before you take Hadith, then clearly they did not help us at all.
I could see Daniel clocking to make a point about this Surah Tahrim. I could see him nodding his head, and he's just sharpening his knives. I could see him in the back. Daniel, do you want to add anything to that point about Surah
Maybe one of my favorite ahadith. Aisha didn't like this revelation about her so much because she actually denied it. Because there was an incident which is also reported in, I think it's in Bukhari. I could search the reference, but I'm sure it would take a minute to search that. But basically, it's in Bukhari that Marwan ibn Hakam, he...
Sayyid Ali, you want to look it up?
Well, I can look it up. It's just
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I
just
think add it. It's good to show that one.
yeah, yeah, and this is a very interesting narration because it puts up a few questions actually, at least about Marwan ibn Hakam, at least about him, but also about Aisha. And I did not get a satisfying answer from any one of the Sunni sects so far. So I'm open to hearing opinions about that from the Sunnis. So now where is it? I'll excuse myself. It's just a minute. There it is. It is in Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, book 60, hadith 30, no, 352. And it says, it's reported by Yusuf ibn Mahak that Marwan had been appointed as the governor of Hijaz by Muawiyah. He delivered a sermon and mentioned Yazid ibn Muawiyah so that the people might take the oath of allegiance to him as the successor of his father, being Muawiyah.
Sorry,
Then,
I found it, bro. I'm going to share it on the screen.
yeah,
You carry on reading it.
that
You
would be
you carry
convenient.
on reading it, and I'll share it on the screen.
That would be more convenient, yeah.
Go for it.
There, yeah. And here we see it. Then Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr told him something, whereupon Marwan ordered that he be arrested. It's interesting that Bukhari omits that. Actually, I think Tafsir ibn Kathir reports what is said, that this is the sunnah of the Persian kings and of the Byzantines to do so. But okay. Whereupon Marwan ordered that he be arrested, but Abdurrahman entered Aisha's house and they could not arrest him. Marwan said, "It is he about whom Allah revealed this verse, and the one who says to his parents, 'Fie on you, do you hold out the promise to me?'" And then it gets interesting. On that, Aisha said from behind the screen, "Allah did not reveal anything from the Quran about us except what was connected with the declaration of my innocence." So this is a massive problem because in the worst case, Aisha is telling a lie about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Quran. And this will be a massive problem.
Well, it's not just a fact. I mean, then what happened to the whole argument that, oh, well, Surah 33 includes the wives of the Prophet?
True.
Right?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
What about this verse which we just showed earlier in Surah Tahrim, where it was clearly revealed about these two wives? And by the way, let me tell you something. There's even conflicting narrations on that where Aisha contradicts herself. So, and then we have this account which says that on that, Aisha said from behind the screen, Allah did not read anything from the Quran about us except what was connected with the declaration of innocence. So they're saying that basically, according to Aisha, the only thing that was mentioned about the Quran, about her particularly, was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearing her on the incident of Ifk.
Surah An-Nur.
Yeah. So then who do we trust here? We've got problems here, right? This is quite clear. This is a problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one brother mentioned this today, that I think it was Daraqutni or Dahabi, one of them, one with a D in the front. With Dahabi, yeah. And it seems like that this was I forgot what was the problem. It confused the whole matter. I forgot it, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry for getting that. But let's. What I wanted to mention is that Aisha is saying about us. So this means the whole family, because her brother is at rest. So then the whole family is in question. And then we come to Abu Bakr. So there was something revealed about him too. We could also add that to the narration, but maybe we'll leave it with Aisha. Then we come to Ummahatul Mu'mineen. Where is that? It was also not about her.
Yeah, of course, that's true. You're right. That's another good point. You know, comes back to the point, was the verse about the wives being not mothers to the believers about her. So yeah, I mean, again, I think we can do a whole series again on this topic and what it means, what commentators of the Holy Quran said about it, and how they themselves have disrespected the wives of the Prophet. You know, if you read some of the things that they've attributed to Aisha and her personality according to their books, you know, you would go out there and you'd get these books and you'd burn them. You know, the amount of blasphemy, the amount of insult, the amount of things they say, you know, and they say, oh, Shias, you disrespect the wives of the Prophet. No, we don't need to disrespect the wives of the Prophet. These are things which your scholars have done. the scholars, the statements that your own scholars have accused, Aisha of, and it's extremely problematic and disgusting. I mean, Hassan Bahari, I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, I remember reading there's a book by a Sufi scholar, Ahmed Raza Khan, and sorry, not Ahmed Raza Khan, Abdul Qadir. What Abdul Qadir says about Aisha, astaghfirullah, you'd be shocked. It's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, also, I mean, if you actually look at during the time of the colonial times, there was a book called Ghadeer Rasul, the Colorful Prophet, written by a non-Muslim Hindu, I think it was, who looked at the life of the Prophet from the narrations of the Al Sunnah, and some of those narrations are effectively just basically copied the narrations which were in the Sahih, which were attributed by Aisha, and they are.
They're blasphemous.
I mean, if you talk about disrespect, you talk about her, the way if the narrations are correct, how she's narrated them, they're pretty awful. And then if we flip it the other way, and they're always talking to us about, you're right, these Zindiq. I mean, we heard one of our own team members went on there, and the very first thing that was said to him was, you disrespect Aisha, you Zindiq, blah blah blah.
To be honest, about brother, when Brother Shadi went on.
Exactly. If you really want to sort of, like tug at the heartstrings on an issue, you really don't want us to do a program on that, because honestly, it's not good. We keep on saying to you guys, try to keep it civil, try to keep it respectful, because once you start using this sort of appalling language, and you force our hand, and if we do a program on Mu'minin, not Aisha in particular, but just the concept of Mu'minin and disrespecting, I can assure you, if we did 2 or 3 programs, the only people that will benefit those programs will not be Muslims. And then afterwards, you're going to complain to us.
I also just want to make another point. Despite everything that we've said on this topic in particular, once again, this is not when it comes to cursing the wives of the Prophet that we were just talking about, not all Shia do that. So I don't want someone going around from this, like, the way they talked about them, and then they hear someone's a Shia and then just automatically think that person knows what we've even been talking about. Because this is what they do. Not they as in all Salafis, not all Salafis are bad, but this is what nut jobs do, right? So, no, 1, not all Shia believe in Tarif. 2, not all Shia curse the Sahaba or the wives of the Prophet. And 3, just pick up a book and put your energy into something other than, wanting to hurt people. You know what I mean? That's what, if any Sunnis, any non-Shia are watching this video, this is a serious plea. Because, we've got an ideology where it can be argued we're not even, supposed to be out giving dawah to the extent where we're trying to convert people and stuff. Yet you guys constantly badmouth us and etc. and have to make us come out of the woodwork, as you guys were just saying. So you're actually doing yourself an injustice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't know why you're attacking us. Because when we do these videos, we give evidences to support it. We don't just sit there and do little 2-minute long videos of us just watching someone else talk and then us smiling. You know what I mean? We actually bring evidence. And if you want to bring more evidence to counter our evidence, that's sweet. Keep bringing it. But let's try to not jump the gun.
There has to be like a civilized manner of speaking with people and communicating, and we've always said this from the start. Our channel is not just about having Shias in there. We, inshallah, I think at some point, next couple of weeks, I'm planning to bring a Salafi brother, a good friend of mine, and to discuss about the concept of imama and khalafa and how to bring unity amongst Muslims, despite our differences. We have no personal vendetta against anyone. People are entitled to share their views and thoughts, but keep it civilized. And there's no need to be rude and calling people derogatory names and mocking people and calling them all sorts.
This goes for the Shia as well.
Absolutely.
It goes 2 ways. Yeah,
absolutely. We do not promote slandering, swearing. It's absolutely disgusting. Sometimes you read some of these comments from even some people call themselves Shias. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Disgusting. this is not the manner of the Ahl al-Bayt. I mean, you know yourselves that generally speaking, when it comes to Shia people, we get praised for akhlaq. Why? Because we take our akhlaq from the Ahl al-Bayt. If you too are a Shia, then you need to behave like a Shia as well. I would recommend you to read the book by Sheikh Saduq that talks about the characteristics of a Shia and see whether you fit the description. Being a Shia is not a small thing. We can claim to be Shia, but in reality, that the description of a Shia is only found in few people. But having said that, let's also be careful about these fake profiles that get made using Shia names and stuff, which is another attempt to defame Shia people by using fake IDs and all sorts.
Or in all fairness too, we have to be aware of that from the other side as well.
True.
There might be some people that think, blah blah blah. So look, there's bad people in all groups and societies and stuff like that. We're not going about. Our aim isn't to attack, non-Shia and them as individuals. We're all trying to do the best that we can. I hope. But it's more about the ideology that we have a problem with that we're talking about and etc. So inshallah ta'ala, everyone can start to grow up a bit more, and including myself, we can all improve.
Yeah, we start with ourselves, don't we? I think. I mean, touching on that, I think we've got almost 2 hours. I think a question was asked last time, Sayyid Ali and the other brothers, as to why we don't invite certain people to come and speak on that live show. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, hear me out here. I think my thinking is very clear, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on this point. We had a brother which went onto their channel, and you see how
can you mention which channel that is? I don't like to really mention names.
Neither do I, but they know who it is.
To be honest with you, this happened actually a couple of weeks back, I think 2 weeks ago, but we only mention it now because it was kind of really brought to our attention properly only in the last few days. And when I watched the video, I was extremely disappointed. Like, I was shocked. I wasn't entirely shocked, but I was very disappointed. There could have been they could have treated them better. They could have spoken respectfully. The moment he came on, it was just a complete, oral assault on them. That's all it was.
Exactly. And the fact of the matter is, you invite him on, and then you verbally abuse him and you speak to him like that. To be honest, if you're going to treat people like that, they're guests essentially in your home, virtual home. If you're going to speak to individuals like that with no respect, no akhlaq, you don't deserve it from us. We're not going to be like you. We're not going to lower ourselves and copy what we would view as the Sunnah of Mavia and be abusive. We're not going to do that. But we're certainly not going to entertain these individuals by coming on our channel. We've seen what you're like. If you'd like that to our brothers or sisters or anyone, if we've seen that your behavior, do not expect that we then open the door and allow you onto our channel platform. That isn't going to happen. And I assume, brothers, you agree with me on that point?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, people make mistakes, and you can sometimes see people change their approach and methods, but what can you do? It's just sometimes people really let themselves down, and that's why, let's be honest. Even this video, we've got 30 people viewing it right now, and within the next 24 hours, it's going to get about 600-700 views. Why? Because people want to listen to what we've got to say. We're not rude, we're not abrupt, we don't personally attack people. We express our views and thoughts. And if we say something wrong in anything we've quoted, then people are welcome to come forward, make a video, contact us, say, listen, I don't agree with the reference you showed. This is a response to it, etc., etc. But yeah, again, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to have a Salafi brother on in the next fortnight or so, and you will see how civilized people speak, and despite our differences, this is a good friend of mine. I've known him for many years, and we've always had these we've had religious discussions before, but we've never taken anything personal after that. I still treat him like a brother, he still treat me like a brother despite our differences. I don't know if Brother Daniel or Ryan want to add anything to that.
Please,
Daniel,
Ryan, you first.
No, you go. Oh, okay. No, but look, I've said before, as you guys have said, I've got friends that are Salafis from UAE and Saudi Arabia, and we get along like a house on fire. Everything's all fine. There's certain topics that when we've discussed it, we've realized maybe it's not the best thing to discuss because someone might not know what the other person knows. I had one of the boys. He's from I can't remember the town. He's from a country town, to my knowledge, in KSA. And he said to me, it's good that we speak because every time we speak, there's something he has to go read. You know what I mean? There's something he hasn't heard before, or et cetera, et cetera. So he enjoys our discussions, even though we don't agree with each other on it. And we both agree that, you know, politics shouldn't get involved in these discussions, especially from him being from Saudi Arabia and dealing with the Shia concept because of their beef with Iran, etc. And we'll touch on that hopefully in another video. But I can sit down with these guys barefooted, eating with our hands from the floor, just rice and meat. You know what I mean? And there's no difference. We're all human.
Yeah.
And you know, we are all Muslim, and you know, we should, you know, share that alleged love that we have for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alihi, and be able to talk civilly with one another based on that alone. So yeah, inshallah we'll cover that and the politics and stuff of that gets often tangled up and has led people to, you know, be offish about the other schools and etc. in future videos. And yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, fully agree that it all depends on the behavior and the mutual respect. So because and maybe we can also take that back to Taqiyyah, because when I talk to my Sunni friends and neighbors, I will tell them, listen, I don't hate Sunnis. I don't hate, not at all. I mean, I even have Sunnis in my family because my wife's family is Sunni. I love them with all of my heart. They're not Nawasib. My Sunni grandmother-in-law cries for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But I hate certain individuals that they respect a lot, and have no problem with sharing my opinion with them. I will tell them, listen, why? I was a Sunni before, and reading certain narrations did not increase my love for these individuals because I didn't find too much good about them. The more I read, it put me in serious doubt about that. And then I made up my mind and said, okay, I choose Shia Islam as the true way for me. And hating some people they adore for what they did doesn't mean that I hate the Sunnis. It all depends on the individual. And I think we can be quite open that we don't hold certain individuals in very high esteem. But yeah, I think it should be done in a scientifically correct and in a objective way, and not try to hurt somebody's religious feelings. And maybe sometimes it's better to avoid things. But I think it's a good opportunity to have a channel like this to make certain things clear, to say, okay, yes, we the Shia Muslims don't like Aisha, we don't like Omar, we don't like Abu Bakr, but not because we are bad people or because we hate the people who love these individuals or we see them in a different light, because we have some facts, like Brother Ryan mentioned. We come with references. We say, okay, listen, it's in the book. They did this, they did that. It's not acceptable for us. So we distance ourselves from these individuals. But this is not because we are hateful, warmongering people from out of hell, but it's because we made our opinion on these individuals. And if you look at politicians, people will have this and that opinion on that.
Just as they differ on religious personalities when it comes to us. I mean,
exactly.
You know, like for example, they don't believe the Prophet's parents. Parents are believers, and yet we hold these people really close to our hearts. They don't consider Hazrat Abu Talib alayhi salam to be, the Imam alayhi salam's father. They don't consider him to be a believer. But again, they're entitled to have their view. You know, I think what it is there's some people who are able to have these type of conversations and, you know, not take things personally, and there's other people who are not made for it. I personally recommend those people who are not made for having these discussions to avoid them. You know, if you're going to start getting emotional and, you know, if you're going to start taking things personally, you know, don't involve yourself in discussions, you know.
True.
Ryan, do you guys, should we move on to the next question quickly?
Bismillah.
Hassan Bari? I think
you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Oh, hold on.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm clear.
I was just saying, we're 2 hours in now. I think we might. Should we not just wrap it up?
How many questions we got left?
Quite a lot.
I think we got like 15. I think we got like 15.
We've got about 7 or 8 more. I think we should tidy it. we should because we'll have more inshallah next week.
I could have sworn you said there were like only like 2 questions left. You got 7 now all of a sudden.
Yeah, we're up to 12. We've got 5 more, and there's a few more which have also come to mind.
All right,
We're
that's
not going to
fine.
be able to tidy
That's
it
fine.
tonight.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, I think the viewers are probably tired of listening to our rhetoric for the last 2 hours anyway. So
Yeah.
But I
so,
think
yeah,
so.
I think we'll conclude it for today. Inshallah, we could perhaps do another series on that.
We'll do another next part next week. I think we could tidy up the
And then
last
we
few
can get
questions.
more interesting discussions, and then we can perhaps discuss what Ibn Qayyim said and these other individuals.
Oh yeah, exactly. Again, like I said, that'll be with a warning.
Yeah, with a warning sign. Yeah, please don't watch if you're under 18 or something.
Exactly. Yeah, adult content.
Yeah.
But inshallah, I think if we wrap it up for tonight.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you very
worries.
much, brothers.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, guys.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, guys.